Chosen one, there is a question that has echoed through the deepest chambers of your heart for longer than you care to admit. Why has everyone else seemed to find love while you remain alone? Why have doors opened for others while yours appeared to stay firmly shut? You have wondered if you were forgotten, overlooked, or somehow less deserving of the happiness you prayed for. But what if your season of singleness was never a punishment? What if it was one of heaven's greatest acts of protection? Today, you are about to uncover the real reason God kept you single all this time, and everything is about to make sense. Chosen one, there is something that many people will never understand, because they judge their lives by what they can see. They measure success by relationships, by weddings, by public celebrations, by the approval of people who themselves are lost. But God has never measured your life that way. While others were chasing companionship, heaven was shaping your character. While others were rushing into relationships they were never prepared for, God was building something inside of you that could never be built through comfort or constant validation. You thought you were waiting for someone else, but the truth is, God was waiting for you. Waiting for the old version of you to die. Waiting for fear to lose its grip. Waiting for insecurity to stop making your decisions. Waiting for your identity to become rooted in Him, instead of being attached to another human being. Most people do not realize that loneliness can become one of God's greatest classrooms. It strips away distractions. It removes the constant noise. It forces you to sit in silence until you finally hear the voice you were ignoring all along. The world fears silence because silence exposes what entertainment hides. But the chosen are different. They are called into quiet places because that is where revelation is born. Every lonely night carried a lesson. Every unanswered prayer carried hidden wisdom. Every disappointment redirected your path away from something that looked beautiful but carried destruction beneath its surface. You only saw rejection. God saw rescue. You only saw delay. God saw divine timing. You only saw an empty seat beside you. God saw a throne He was preparing you to occupy. Think about how many people entered relationships simply because they feared being alone. They ignored warning signs. They overlooked dishonesty. They sacrificed their peace for temporary affection. They traded their purpose for attention. Then years later they found themselves asking God to rescue them from the very relationship they once begged Him to allow. You were spared from battles you never knew existed. There were conversations about you that never reached your ears because God silenced them. There were people who smiled in your face but secretly carried motives that would have shattered your future. There were opportunities that looked like blessings but were carefully disguised traps. There were relationships that seemed perfect on the outside, but would have drained every ounce of your spiritual strength. God does not only answer prayers by saying yes. Sometimes His greatest answer is the closed door you spent years questioning. The enemy understands something that many believers overlook. If he cannot stop your destiny, he will attempt to distract it. And one of the easiest distractions is placing the wrong person in the right season. A relationship that begins with excitement can quietly become a prison when it is not aligned with God's purpose. Chosen one, your assignment has always been bigger than your emotions. That is why your path could never resemble everyone else's journey. You watched friends get engaged. You attended weddings. You celebrated anniversaries that belonged to other people while secretly asking why your own breakthrough never arrived. Yet every event that made you question yourself was another reminder that God writes every story differently. Comparison is one of the enemy's favorite weapons because it convinces people to abandon divine timing in exchange for human impatience. The chosen cannot afford impatience. Impatience builds what wisdom would have avoided. You may not realize it today, but every extra year you spent alone strengthened muscles that could never have been developed inside an unhealthy relationship. You learned resilience. You learned discernment. You learned to survive without constant reassurance from another person. You discovered that your value was not determined by whether someone chose you, because the Creator had already chosen you before the foundations of the world. That truth changes everything. When your identity no longer depends on being desired by people, you become impossible to manipulate. This is exactly why certain relationships never happened. God refused to allow your future to become controlled by someone who only loved the parts of you that benefited them. Some people would have celebrated your gifts while secretly resenting your calling. Others would have admired your strength until it challenged their own insecurity. Some would have encouraged your dreams only as long as those dreams remained smaller than theirs. God saw every hidden intention long before you ever met them. You judged appearances. He judged hearts. There is a reason Scripture reminds us that man looks at the outward appearance, while God looks at the heart. Heaven evaluates what human eyes cannot detect. A charming smile cannot fool God. Beautiful words cannot deceive the one who searches every motive. Attractive personalities mean nothing if the foundation beneath them is built on pride, selfishness, and deception. Imagine how many tears God prevented simply by delaying one introduction. Imagine how many sleepless nights He erased before they ever happened. Imagine how many years of regret disappeared because heaven quietly whispered, "Not yet." You interpreted God's silence as abandonment. In reality, it was protection wrapped in patience. The hardest thing for the chosen is accepting that preparation rarely feels exciting while it is happening. Seeds buried underground appear forgotten. Yet that hidden season determines the strength of everything that grows afterward. Roots always develop before fruit. Character always comes before influence. Obedience always comes before promotion. God follows this pattern because he values endurance more than speed. The world celebrates overnight success. Heaven celebrates lifelong faithfulness. That is why your lonely season lasted longer than you expected. God was building foundations deep enough to support the weight of your future. Without those foundations, success itself could have become your downfall. Many people pray for blessings while ignoring the responsibility attached to receiving them. They ask for influence without integrity. They ask for relationships without maturity. They ask for abundance without discipline. God loves his children too much to answer prayers that would destroy them in their current condition. Sometimes his mercy sounds exactly like, "Wait, a chosen one." Waiting has never meant wasting. Every day you remained faithful while nothing seemed to change. Invisible construction was taking place inside your spirit. Your faith was becoming stronger. Your discernment was becoming sharper. Your dependence on God was becoming deeper. Your ability to recognize counterfeit connections was increasing with every lesson learned. You may have thought nothing was happening because you could not see visible results. But heaven specializes in invisible work. The greatest transformations usually happen beneath the surface long before anyone notices them. A tree does not suddenly become strong the day it bears fruit. Its strength was quietly developing long before anyone admired its branches. Likewise, your spiritual authority has been forming through every season of isolation, disappointment, unanswered question, and delayed expectation. That authority cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be inherited from another person. It is earned through surrender, obedience, and unwavering trust when circumstances tempt you to give up. There were moments when you almost settled. Moments when loneliness whispered that any relationship would be better than no relationship. Moments when compromise disguised itself as opportunity. Moments when your emotions nearly convinced you that partial peace was better than temporary solitude. But something inside you refused to agree. Even when you could not explain it, your spirit sensed that something was not right. That hesitation was not fear. It was discernment. God was teaching your heart to recognize the difference between attraction and alignment, between chemistry and covenant, between excitement and eternal purpose. Very few people learn that distinction before it is too late. Because the chosen are not called to build their lives on emotions that change with every season. They are called to stand upon truth that remains steady even when everything around them shifts. God knew that if he gave you the relationship before establishing that foundation, you might begin to worship the gift instead of the giver. You might unknowingly place another person in a position that belongs only to him. That is a burden no human being was ever created to carry. Many people expect their partner to heal wounds that only God can restore. They expect another person to erase years of insecurity, replace lost confidence, silence old fears, and fill empty places within their soul. But no relationship can survive under the weight of impossible expectations. When two broken people demand that each other become the source of their peace, disappointment is inevitable. God refused to allow you to enter love carrying chains that would eventually destroy it. Instead, he began breaking those chains while you were still alone. He exposed habits you did not even know existed. He revealed fears you had buried beneath smiles. He confronted pride that disguised itself as independence. He uncovered pain you thought time had already healed. There were nights when old memories suddenly returned without warning. Conversations you thought you had forgotten replayed themselves in your mind. Rejections from years ago resurfaced with unexpected clarity. You wondered why God would allow those painful memories to rise again after so much time had passed. It was because healing often requires exposure before restoration. A wound hidden beneath a bandage cannot truly heal if infection remains underneath. God was not reopening old pain to punish you. He was bringing hidden damage into the light so it could finally be removed completely. The chosen cannot afford hidden infections within their spirit. Their future is too significant. Their calling is too valuable. Their influence will reach too many lives. God prepares his servants differently because he knows the weight they are destined to carry. While others viewed your singleness as emptiness, heaven viewed it as sacred preparation. Every season of isolation became another opportunity for God to rewrite the story you believed about yourself. Perhaps you once believed you were difficult to love. Perhaps rejection convinced you that something was wrong with you. Perhaps someone walked away and left behind words that became part of your identity. Those words echoed through your thoughts for years. They're happier without you. You'll always be alone. No one will ever understand you. You're too much. You're not enough. The enemy loves planting lies during painful seasons because pain makes deception appear believable. But God's voice has always spoken something different. You are chosen. You are loved. You are called. You are valuable before anyone applauds you. You are complete before anyone holds your hand. You belong to God before you belong to anyone else. Once that truth settles inside your heart, desperation loses its power. You stop chasing people who constantly make you question your worth. You stop forcing conversations that require endless effort just to survive. You stop begging for attention that should be given freely. You stop confusing temporary affection with lasting commitment. Most importantly, you stop believing that your future depends upon someone else's decision to stay. Your future has always rested safely in God's hands. That is why no human rejection has ever been strong enough to cancel what heaven has already established. People can delay opportunities. They cannot destroy divine purpose. People can misunderstand your heart. They cannot rewrite God's plans. People can leave your life unexpectedly. They cannot take away what God has assigned to you. This realization changes the way you walk through life. Instead of living in fear of being abandoned, you begin living with confidence that whatever truly belongs in your life cannot be stolen by another person. If someone walks away, God remains. If someone betrays your trust, God remains. If doors close without explanation, God remains. His faithfulness does not fluctuate with human behavior. That consistency becomes the anchor of the chosen. There is another reason your season of singleness lasted longer than expected. God was teaching you how to hear His voice without interference. Imagine trying to tune into a quiet frequency while loud music blares in the background. Many relationships become that background noise. Not because relationships are wrong, but because people often allow them to consume every thought, every decision, and every emotion. God wanted your spiritual hearing to become so clear that even the smallest whisper from heaven would immediately capture your attention. That level of sensitivity requires uninterrupted time. It requires stillness. It requires moments where there is no one else's opinion competing with God's instruction. How many times did you feel prompted not to go somewhere? How many times did you sense peace disappear before making a decision? How many times did God quietly redirect your steps without explaining why? Each of those moments strengthened your discernment. Discernment is not developed through information alone. It grows through relationship with God. The more consistently you sought Him during lonely seasons, the more familiar His voice became. Now you recognize warnings that others overlook. You notice subtle shifts in people's character. You sense dishonesty before evidence appears. You detect manipulation hidden beneath flattering words. This is not coincidence. It is the fruit of years spent learning to listen. Chosen one. One conversation with the wrong person can create years of confusion. One agreement with deception can delay purpose. One emotional decision can redirect an entire future. That is why heaven guarded your path so carefully. The delays were intentional. The waiting was purposeful. The silence was strategic. While you believed nothing was happening, angels were arranging circumstances beyond your understanding. People were being moved into different cities. Careers were shifting. Hearts were changing. Doors were opening and closing according to a timeline that stretched far beyond your limited perspective. God sees generations. We usually see only today's disappointment. His plans operate with eternal vision. Ours often operate with temporary emotion. This difference explains why trusting Him sometimes feels difficult. Faith asks you to believe in what has not yet become visible. Patience asks you to remain faithful before receiving confirmation. Obedience asks you to continue walking even when the destination remains hidden. These qualities cannot be produced overnight. They are cultivated slowly through seasons exactly like the one you experienced. Some people assume singleness means God has forgotten them. The opposite is often true. Sometimes He keeps His strongest warriors hidden because premature exposure attracts unnecessary attacks. A seed exposed before its roots are established will never survive the first storm. God understands timing better than anyone. He knows exactly when your character can sustain the blessing you desire. Not merely receive it, sustain it. Receiving is easy. Maintaining requires maturity. Countless people celebrate what they prayed for only to lose it because they were never prepared to steward it. God is not interested in temporary victories. He desires lasting fruit. That is why your process looked slower than everyone else's. Your life has never been about speed. It has always been about stability. Have you noticed that some of the strongest people you admire often walk through the longest seasons of preparation? There is a reason for that. Depth cannot be manufactured quickly. Wisdom is rarely gained without struggle. Compassion often grows from personal pain. Humility is usually born through waiting. Everything God intended to produce within your required time. The clock frustrated you. Heaven never panicked. God has never been anxious about your future. Only you were. He already knew every conversation you would have, every opportunity you would receive, every person you would meet, every lesson you would learn. Nothing has ever surprised Him. When you finally understand that, peace begins replacing pressure. You no longer feel obligated to force doors open. You stop chasing timelines created by culture. You stop believing you have somehow fallen behind, because you realize something incredibly important. You cannot be late for an appointment God Himself scheduled. People may tell you that time is running out. God says purpose is unfolding. People count birthdays. God counts obedience. People focus on calendars. God focuses on readiness. These are completely different measurements. Chosen one, perhaps the greatest lesson singleness taught you is contentment. Not the kind of contentment that settles for less, but the kind that refuses to compromise simply to escape loneliness. There is tremendous strength in a person who has learned to enjoy God's presence without constantly needing human validation. That person becomes dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Why? Because manipulation no longer works. Fear no longer controls them. Rejection no longer defines them. They have discovered a peace the world cannot manufacture. That peace becomes evident in everything they do. It influences the way they speak, the way they make decisions, the way they handle conflict, the way they love others without losing themselves. That kind of maturity cannot be purchased. It is forged. It is refined. It is earned through countless quiet moments when no one else was watching except God. Remember those mornings when you prayed without seeing immediate answers. Remember those evenings when tears became your only language. Remember those moments when all you could say was, "Lord, I don't understand." He heard every word, even the ones you never spoke aloud, especially those. God understands the language of silent tears. He recognizes prayers hidden inside exhausted sighs. He sees faith that continues believing despite overwhelming uncertainty. Never assume your quiet obedience went unnoticed. Heaven records faithfulness differently than earth does. The world applauds visible achievements. God celebrates hidden surrender. The world notices public victories. God notices private integrity. The world admires impressive appearances. God values transformed hearts. This is why your process could never resemble the crowd. You were never being prepared for ordinary living. Every delay was adding another layer of strength that would one day support the weight of blessings you cannot yet imagine. Even now, there are pieces moving into place beyond your sight. Doors you have never knocked on are being prepared. Conversations you have never imagined are drawing closer. Divine connections are forming according to God's perfect timing, not human urgency. The same God who protected you from what was wrong also knows exactly how to lead you toward what is right. That is why your responsibility has never been to chase. It has always been to remain faithful where you are, trusting that the one who authored your story has never lost control of a single page. And when that understanding finally settles into your spirit, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop asking God, "Why am I still single?" And you begin asking, "Lord, what are you teaching me in this season?" That single shift changes everything. Instead of viewing your waiting as empty, you recognize it as sacred. Instead of seeing yourself as delayed, you understand that you are being developed. Every day that once felt ordinary becomes another opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more deeply rooted in God's presence. Chosen one, never underestimate what God can accomplish in a season that appears quiet. Some of His greatest miracles begin long before anyone else can see them. Just as the sunrise starts below the horizon before its light fills the sky, God's work often begins in hidden places. He has been preparing opportunities you could not have arranged, protecting you from dangers you never detected, and aligning circumstances that only His wisdom could orchestrate. One day you will look back and realize that every closed door carried mercy. Every unanswered prayer carried protection. Every delay carried purpose. The relationships that never happened were not proof that you were unworthy. They were evidence that God refused to let anything interfere with the destiny He had written over your life. What felt like loss was often divine preservation. What felt like isolation became intimate fellowship with the one who knows you better than anyone ever could. There will come a moment when everything begins to connect. The lessons, the waiting, the disappointments, the tears, and the victories will no longer seem like scattered pieces. They will reveal a masterpiece that only God could create. You will see that He never wasted a single season. Every challenge strengthened your faith. Every setback refined your character. Every lonely night deepened your dependence on Him. And because of that, you became someone capable of carrying blessings without allowing those blessings to replace the one who gave them. So if you are still waiting today, do not mistake God's silence for His absence. He is closer than you realize. He is working in ways your natural eyes cannot yet perceive. Continue to walk in faith. Continue to guard your heart. Continue to become the person God is calling you to be. Refuse to settle for anything less than His best simply because the journey feels longer than expected. Trust that the author of your story knows exactly when each chapter should unfold. Chosen one, this season was never designed to diminish you. It was designed to reveal you. God kept you single not because He was withholding goodness, but because He was preparing you for a future that required greater strength, deeper wisdom, unwavering faith, and complete dependence on Him. And when His perfect timing arrives, you will not merely receive a blessing, you will have become the person who is fully prepared to steward it with gratitude, humility, and purpose. That is the real reason God kept you single all this time. And one day you will thank Him for every moment you once struggled to understand.